They have a price cap on what products you're allowed to sell.
Would you say that it's still possible to just do this as a hobby now that you've seen it is very commercialized now?
So Dokomi, you always hear like the big, oh my God, it's the best one. But I know of a lot of artists and a lot of friends of mine who used to do it who have just given up because they're like, I do way better at my like local fairs.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Season 3 of The Creative Confessions, where we talk about all things artist alley, manufacturing products as an artist, and small business advice. I'm your host, Macy, and I'm the artist and designer behind Mualcaina, a small business focused on kawaii designs. I'm excited to welcome our next guest, who is an illustrator and designer and fellow con content creator with a perspective vending in numerous cons in the EU. Without further ado, I'm excited to welcome Yona, better known as Kabujiro. Hello, thanks for joining.
Happy to be here.
So I'd love to start out if you could share a little bit about yourself and how you started Kabujiro.
Hey, I'm Kabujiro. I'm an artist and small business owner based in Vienna, Austria in Europe, and I've been doing this for the past 8 years now.
Wow, you're definitely like the pre-2020 con vendor.
The pre-COVID boom where everybody decided they're gonna do this now. I remember when it was easy getting into cons.
No, I bet. So before running your business, what did you do?
So I was a student. I kind of started this during high school, and then I was studying and I did it during my studies, and then I finished my studies and I'm still doing this. So I never really had a proper job. I worked at like a mini job at a theater checking tickets for like 10 hours a week, but that kind of ended with COVID, and then I was just like, okay, this is what I'm doing now.
And do you currently do this full time?
I do this full time. So I do conventions, I do online sales, and then I do commissioned works and designs for various companies and musical acts and like everybody who needs merch, including the Austrian government. So it's a very wide spectrum, but it's mostly things I do for myself and for the Kabujiro brand.
And as of now, are you doing everything yourself in your business, whether that's designing, fulfillment, social media, and editing content?
Yeah, it's basically just me. I have a few helpers who join at conventions when they have time and they feel up to it. And then my partner occasionally helps with product photography as he is a professional photographer. But otherwise, it's all just me. Although I am looking this year to get somebody fulfillment because that's my least favorite part of the job. I really don't like packing orders. I just came back from the studio before recording this, and it's just, I don't like it. I get so bored.
No, that's fair. I feel like for myself as well, when it comes to getting help, I would much rather have someone packing orders and then I could just focus on the art or even like content creation aspect. So some of our listeners may be familiar with you and your work since you also vlog at conventions and also create small business content. When did you first start vending at cons?
My first conventions were like Comic-Con and craft fairs in Vienna. Late 2017, early 2018. I did Vienna Comic-Con a few times and kind of the Austrian convention scene. And then 2020 was the year where I was going to go international with a bunch of European conventions. And then I had all of my confirmations. And then, of course, COVID happened. So I started doing all of those 2022, 2021. Some could happen in the summer depending on which country had which COVID regulations. And now I do conventions primarily in Austria and Germany, but I've also done conventions in France, in Belgium, in the Czech Republic.
If you remember, how many cons have you done since you first started back in 2017?
I was listening to everybody else's podcast, the ones that I hadn't caught up to yet, and then trying to find a number, and it's been 100 something. I aim to do around 25 a year. And that's been my average the last few years as well. So I did 26 conventions last year and 24 the year before.
Oh my goodness. That's a lot. I'm used to having about like 10. I know I think for a lot of people that tends to be on the above average scale, but that's a lot. Wow.
It's a busy schedule. I mean, not all of them are like big, huge Dokomi sized conventions. Some of them are just within Austria, within Vienna, so I don't need to travel as far. Like last year, late September to early November, it was like 8 cons in 3 countries back to back each weekend. Wow. It looks like it's going to be that way again this year because they all kind of coalesce around October. October is the worst month for conventions because they're all in October.
That's really interesting because I know here in the US, typically most of the conventions occur in the summertime. I think it starts around like mid-May and then it kind of peters off until August or so, and then it kind of slows down. But I didn't know that October would be where most of the cons would occur.
Depends. Some of the really big ones are in the summer. Dokomi is in the summer. Dokomi is usually in June. Japan Expo Paris is usually in July. But then there's not much else that wants to compete with that. So they kind of all avoid the same months. There's a bunch of German cons, both in the gaming and in like the anime pop culture sphere, that are in October. And all of the Comic Cons, for some reason, are November, December. Vienna Comic Con, Comic Con Germany, and German Comic Con, which are two separate events that do not belong together and are within like 2 weeks of each other. It's logistically a mess.
So since you've referenced that you're based in Austria, and after watching a few of your vlogs, I have noticed that most of the cons you've ended at, and you've also brought up, are primarily within the European Union. Are you focused on European conventions, and I know you did bring up about traveling outside of the EU, or would you consider traveling outside of the EU for conventions?
I'd love to. It's just legally and logistically a bit of a nightmare, just from all of the custom duties I need to pay, the sales permits. I am not aware of a visa that would allow me to table at US cons, just because these kind of short-term work visas do not exist for the States, from what I've gathered or what I've heard from other artists. So the only way for me to do Anime Expo would be to hire somebody in the States, but then personally be there and smile and technically not touch any of the money. Like that's, and it's just all a hassle. And I have enough conventions within Europe. And even then, each country has different regulations and there's things you need to be aware of. So it's not smooth sailing, even if you're just within Europe. But even then, I'm happy with the cons I have in Europe. I don't need to do even more conventions, although there are some in the States that look really fun.
No, I definitely see that, because for myself, I think if I were to consider going to an international convention, I think it would be more so for fun or just for the experience. Like I know a few US artists who are doing Dokomi, or they just got in. I considered applying, but I was like, logistically, I don't know how that would work or how I would go through it within the legal means. But even with yourself, and I don't remember their username, but another UK artist who does a lot of international conventions. And I can imagine with how amazing the public transportation is in the EU and just within through Europe, that it's easy to go to different countries just by train, rather than here in the US. It's like you just have to fly everywhere.
I've flown to two conventions. I once flew to Made in Asia Belgium in Brussels and to Japan Expo Paris. But since my stock has just gotten so bulky, I used to be primarily like prints and stickers, and now I do sweaters and shirts and bags and a bunch of other big bulky stuff, that just flying has become logistically not feasible, because shipping is a thing, but not really as established as in other places. I used to do everything by train. So I'd have like 60 kilograms, which you'll have to convert into pounds because I have absolutely no idea.
That's okay.
I checked what feet and meters are for the table sizes, but weights, I am oblivious. So at this point, I need like a minivan to drive all of these places. So Vienna, Düsseldorf is like a 12-hour drive if you take a decent break. So it's decent distances. Vienna, Hamburg is even further for like things like Polaris, and Vienna, Paris would be way too far. So I kind of stopped doing Japan Expo Paris. Although that is, if you want to attend a con from the States as a visitor, Japan Expo Paris has like 250,000 people and is very, very cool.
Oh, I bet. That's definitely on my bucket list of cons to attend. I've heard so many good things about that con. Which types of conventions have you found most successful for your products?
I don't notice a big difference between like Comic Cons and anime conventions when it comes to sales. So I do a lot of these Japanese pop culture anime events, and then I do Comic Cons, and then I also do craft fairs, and I also do board game conventions, and I also do like gaming esports themed events. So there's quite a wide breadth of the type of event. And for me, it kind of depends more, is it at the beginning of the month, is it at the end of the month? Do people have like cash flow at the moment, and how many people are there? And I don't notice as much of a difference between the type of event that it is. I don't do as well as at craft fairs, but everything that is in kind of the pop culture, gaming, anime theme, it goes decently well. But that also depends by event and by city. So it's less what type of event and more where is it and how big is it.
I know you've brought this up a little bit earlier, but what are some of the biggest, it could be like anime cons or comic conventions within the EU that you'd say is worth traveling to as a non-European artist?
Okay, I'm gonna put a caveat in here between which ones I think are worth attending as somebody who attends them and which ones I think are worth attending just based on all of the legal things. And I am not a lawyer, and this is not
Yes,
to be
yes.
taken as legal advice, but there's a few things that I think people need to be aware of before coming to a European country. The big cons or the fun ones that I just find are worth it are, of course, Dokomi, which everybody talks about. I was just texting with Lisanne, so Explodey Kid, yesterday about how excited that they're coming back from the States to Dokomi. There's a few international artists every year. It's been getting more competitive. They're sending out confirmations. Dokomi has around like 180-ish, 160,000 people. It's 3 days in Düsseldorf in Germany. It's used to be like a high school, like organized local volunteer thing, and it just grew and grew and grew. And now it's a company that does it, but it's still kind of the same team, and it's still very much community focused. They also have an absolutely massive artist alley. It's, I think, 900 tables. It is a very big artist alley. They just in the Discord said they had over 4,000 applicants. And I mean, there's the regular tables, and then there's bigger pro tables, and it's kind of an interesting system how the applications work. It's a third is juried, a third is first come, first serve, and a third is raffled. And the jury includes if you do like a workshop for them or you do illustration projects for them, you can get in as well. That's how I got in this year. I'm doing a workshop at this year's Dokomi. Then there's Japan Expo Paris, which has more attendees, but is kind of worse sales-wise because what I've noticed is the French are just a little bit stingier. So I've kind of stopped doing Japan Expo Paris. They have, if you don't get the expensive passion booths, which are like above $2,000, if you get like the regular table, they have a price cap on what products you're allowed to sell.
Oh.
So if you get like the hobby amateur booth, which you can also only get if you can prove to them via legal documents that art isn't your full-time job and this is a hobby. So you need to send them stuff. Japan Expo Paris is its own beast of an operation.
Oh my goodness.
I love the shocked faces. We're going to get way more bureaucratical later on. It's 12 euros. You're not allowed to sell any items above 12 euros. So if you do anything other than prints and stickers, like it's not worth it. I couldn't sell shirts or bags or whatever. I did it when I was still a university student next to doing art. So I could kind of prove that I'm a student and I got a cheaper table. And then it was kind of worth it. And that's where I met the Copic representatives. And then I met them in Japan. So it's cool for connections, and all of the big companies and publishers from Japan fly in and they have the best guests. I really like Manga Comic Con, which is part of Leipzig Book Fair. So it's one big event. They have like 350,000 people over 4 days in Leipzig in Germany as well, which is a bit more southern Germany. They have like big pro booths, and kind of the comic section is taking over the entire book fair. So each year the comic and manga part of the book fair gets more and more convention halls. And it's also just always a great vibe, great for like manga self-published artists. And they really kind of appreciate art there. And it's also pretty decent sales-wise. I have a booth there. It's coming up in March. So I think those are the big three. And then there's a bunch of UK cons that are cool, which I've never done because since Brexit, vending in the UK has become a bit of a hassle as well. And I've kind of stopped applying or hoping for those kinds of events. But I know a bunch of friends who do them. So all of the MCM, London, Birmingham, all of those events are also cool. And there's a bunch of vlogs from like UK artists on the internet as well, which I enjoy binge watching and living vicariously through instead of actually going myself.
Yeah, I've always heard about Dokomi just because, yeah, similar, a lot of US artists go to that one or they try to apply for that one. I have heard about Japan Expo. I know that was like one of the biggest anime conventions in the world. I don't know if it's more than AX actually, but it could be like on par with Anime Expo. But I didn't know about that.
How many people does Anime Expo have?
I think it's about like 200,000 attendees as well. I'm not sure if it's increased or decreased recently because I think last year they had a cap. Because it was a little too much back in 2023, but I don't know how. Yeah, it was pretty insane.
I saw the videos. Now I feel like Japan Expo has more attendees. I do think it's bigger, and Dokomi is probably going to reach like the 200,000 this year with how ticket sales going. They were at like 170,000, I think was the official number. I'd have to look it up again. And they've been growing rapidly, and they've added a few more exhibit halls, so now it's the entire space. I just saw kind of the rough floor plan without, of course, the booths because they haven't finished sending out confirmations yet. It's an entire convention hall just for the artist alley.
Wow.
And that's just the regular artist alley. Then they have a second area for fashion, which is it's the same artist alley tables, but if you do more accessories and fashion, then they have another exhibit hall for like the 18 plus area, which also has a massive artist alley in it. Dokomi
Wow.
really is the artist con, which means as an international artist, and here are all of the caveats that I was going to mention earlier, what make it a bit more difficult. If you don't really bring all of your stuff and your A game and like your cool effort, it's very easy to get lost there. So if you just get like the regular 6 foot table in one of the smaller spaces because you're flying and you can't bring as much, it's really hard to kind of not get lost. And I hear that from a bunch of artists there, that half of the artists at Dokumi make bank and half of them are losing money by being there because they're just getting lost. So Dokumi, you always hear like the big, oh my God, it's the best one. But I know of a lot of artists and a lot of friends of mine who used to do it who have just given up because they're like, I do way better at my like local fairs
Oh,
where the costs are
wow.
lower because hotel prices in Düsseldorf are very expensive and the competition is just very steep. So it's kind of, I'm guessing similar to Anime Expo where it's like the big one that if you are like well established or have like a very clear branding or like a very recognizable table or very up to date with all of the shows and the trends that are being hyped at the moment, then go for it. But otherwise, it's a risky one, especially if you have higher travel costs and visa and need to ship all of your stuff in advance.
Yeah. Yeah, 100%. I would say that Anime Expo is very similar. I think for the artists here in the US, I don't think artists are treated as well, or at least they're not as of importance compared to like the exhibitor hall, since exhibitor hall does bring in more money. And I know here in the US, like they like to prioritize money over everything. So for AX, I think there's about 700 artists. And at this point, we kind of share it's not even a hall, it's technically a parking lot. But we share that hall with I think like a few other vendors that like overflow from like the main exhibitor hall. So it's not even like the whole artist alley. And then there's like a small part, I don't know about this year, but there's also a very, very small part of some 18 plus exhibitor booths. For us, I would say it's pretty similar. If you do fall into the trends, like now that Dun Dun Dun's really big right now, I know the past years, like if you had JJK, if you had One Piece, you would do super well because fan art is usually well sought out within these anime cons and specifically for Anime Expo. But then I have heard of a few people who barely make table. I think for us, table, the price is like, what is it now? I think it's like $715 for a 6 foot table and then 2 Artist Alley badges. And then some people don't even make that because if you don't have a very well established display, you can get easily lost. And even if like other people who are super popular next to you, sometimes their line goes into your line or they like block your table. So now it's like people can't really even buy from you.
At Dokumi, there's different table sizes. So there's the regular tables are 6 feet, and I think they're not $7, they're I think like half that, I believe. You can get 2 as well, 12 foot table. Then there's corner booths, which are 9 by 6 feet.
Okay.
And then there's even bigger booths. So this year I have like a 20 by 7.5.
Oh, wow. That's a
If you
lot.
watch my Dokomi vlog, which of course I will plug at the end, there's one size above that, which is like a 27 by 7.5 booth,
Oh,
which
wow.
a few other artists have as well. And there's not many of those, so they're gone. But there's different sizes. And it's really only Dokomi that really prioritizes artists as much as this because they kind of become known as the artist convention in Europe. But all of the other cons, it's the same. The prices have kind of doubled each year. And the Dokomi prices also used to be way lower than they are today. So at this point, I regularly spend between like 1.5 and 3 grand on tables, although a lot of them are cheaper than that.
Yeah, that's that is so nice. I think for us in the States, for a lot of anime conventions, I'm assuming that's within like the artist alley. It's not considered like
These are
exhibitor for
artist
that
alley
much
tables.
space.
These are
Wow.
not, and it's just, I mean, it's also just Dokumi, which offers these bigger booths. Although corner booths that are like 7 by 7 or 8 by 8 feet are becoming more popular, but otherwise, I love how in the States it's like, okay, there's the 6 foot and the 8 foot table. In Europe, each table has a different size. Each single convention has
Oh.
a different table size, and it can be 4 feet. Vienna Comic Con, I mean, you can book more than one. You can book up to 3, I believe. But
Oh,
it's
wow.
a lot of people just get the one 4 foot table. Animagic in Mannheim or Konichi also only has a 4 feet table. And those are great cons. Animagic had Junji Ito as their
Oh,
guest
wow.
last year. And they have a bunch of like very recognizable J-pop groups. And it's a very cool convention. But they only take like 30 artists and the tables are 4 feet each. It's also original art only. So they don't allow any fan art whatsoever, which is fine for me. I basically have no fan art. I have a few Ghibli things which are slowly being discontinued. I haven't watched any of the new series, so I'd be bad making stuff for
You're
them. I'm so out of the loop.
I
Uh,
think if it's working out for you with original art, that's
yeah,
honestly like the best way to go, really.
I can do my fun little projects. And also, I feel like since the type of merch that I've been enjoying making lately is so time consuming and it takes just so long to produce that if I wanted to hop on a trending series, by the time I'd have finished my designs and have manufactured them, the trend would be over. That's why I also kind of stick to kind of my old school Pokemon and my kind of Ghibli inspired items because those will always be good. But otherwise, I just kind of enjoy doing my like Japanese mythology and like traditional type of merchandise.
That's good. I want to go into that direction of pursuing more original art rather than fan art. Even like the whole, besides legality, I think for a lot of conventions now, especially with how competitive Artist Alley is, if I want to go into exhibitor hall, which sometimes it's in the same hall depending on the convention, so it doesn't really matter in terms of traffic. Usually some of them don't or they don't allow fan art. And if I do want a more consistent income, I would say, because with Artist Alley, I'm not sure if it's similar there in the EU. For Artist Alley, like we really don't know if we can get in, I think, because I can only name a couple conventions that allow rebooking for Artist Alley tables, which is very few and far in between. But if I want to have the stability of knowing, oh, I have this and this convention next year, I would have to get into exhibitor hall to have that.
I do a few exhibitor booths every year just because either the art study table is so small that I'm fine with paying more for the table, or if it's just a con that I really need a guaranteed spot in. I don't do it for Dokomi just because the art study is the place to be. And I kind of hope and fingers crossed, but they send out confirmations, rejections over like a 3 week period because they manually check everything and send it out. In those 3 weeks, every Discord server and every group is kind of holding their breath, hoping that every day a batch of rejections and acceptances are sent out. And it's a nerve-wracking experience. I only know like one or two cons that do rebooking, and it's not cons I've ever been able to get into. I don't even have the benefit of being able to rebook those. A lot of them are raffled. All of the Comic Cons are first come, first serve because they're commercial and they don't care, so they're just like, we fill the spots and we're done. Dokumi has like a split system, which I enjoy because then nobody's happy and everybody can complain equally about it's a system that they don't like, which I find I'm totally fine with. I'm good at first come, first serve, so I don't feel bad about, like, I can't hate it because I'm very fast at filling in these forms, so I usually get a spot that way. I like juries if they manage to have like a balance of styles and themes. A few cons, there's a jury, but the jury consists of one person and you can clearly tell what their
Oh.
preferences are, and that always is kind of divisive within the community. Dealer halls are great, but there's a bunch of extra legal things you need to consider, which are slowly happening in the artist alley as well this year, or I guess last year at Vienna Comic Con. For example, the tax office sent an email to every single artist in advance saying they'll be there, make sure that you have all of your forms in order, and they will be checking, which they've been doing at a bunch of conventions recently, which includes you need kind of like a VAT, a sales tax, a permit which varies from country to country. You need, at least in Austria that's the case, and it's technically also the case in Germany, to hand out a physical printed receipt to every customer. So also for cash sales and card sales, everybody has the receipt printer and it's super slow. It's something that technically should be done. And if they check, you are required to be able to provide a receipt. Of course, this year, the big topic that everybody's been talking about, which I've also heard is the reason why a bunch of US artists stopped shipping to Europe, is the whole GSPR, General Product Safety Regulations, which require safety standards for all items, as well as the contact information for a European representative. So if you're a European artist, you are your own representative, which is fine. But then you need to make sure that all of your manufacturers have certain CE or REACH certificates. And then you need to print the warning labels plus a physical address where somebody can contact you if they have concerns on the packaging. So on the backing cards are included on like an extra card. And if you're outside of the EU, you need to pay a European representative. This is not just for online sales. This also counts if you sell the products physically. So if you're an American artist who wants to do a convention, you do need to be aware that you do need to comply with the GPSR regulations,
Wow, that
which is fun.
it's a lot.
It's great. And the same as there's packaging laws. So because of like recycling initiatives, each country has their own packaging laws, which means you need to pay a certain amount if you send paper or plastic or cardboard packaging into that country for your online sales. And each country at the moment still has a different system. This year, they finally managed to get an EU-wide sales tax system. If you're within the EU, you fall under that if you make under 100K in revenue in all of these countries. It doesn't apply to me anymore. I need to actually register in each country I sell. But if you fall under that, it's a bit easier, and it just rolled out like a month ago. So, yeah, and I hope that they soon have a European-wide packaging system where I can just input how many kilograms of cardboard I estimate to send in each country, and it's fine. It does add up. It's between like $50 and $200 per country in the EU. So if you don't really send a lot to those countries, it can get pricey.
Yeah, I'm surprised there isn't like an EU-wide version. That's expensive.
I'm sure they're working on that. It's probably going to take time. The Austrian one used to be like $20, but they got rid of the minimum threshold this year. So now the baseline is $150. And I'm like, why? This is not very small business friendly, but it's fine. It's fine. We are thriving. We have long Discord channels where we all discuss what legal requirements are important, and we are doing our best.
So since you've been vending since 2017, what have been the biggest changes you've noticed in the artist alley scene?
Oh, it's become a business. I remember in like 2016, 2017, I could maybe count on one hand who was doing it full time, and everybody else, it was a hobby, and they were selling postcards and stickers and bookmarks. And if you had a button machine, you were the coolest person ever. And at this point, when people come up to me being like, I want to start art sally, how many enamel pins do I have at my first convention? And I was like, you don't. Make a few posters. Like, it's fine. It's just become so commercial. Also because the table prices, my first conventions were free. The booth was free, or it was like $10 to attend, which is why during high school I was fine doing that, and I would cut out my stickers by hand and make pocket change. But it was fun, and it was a great learning experience. And now it's become so competitive, so commercial, and so well organized in the sense of the variety of products that people make. Like, I remember enamel pins being the coolest thing ever. And like, if you had enamel pins, that was really fancy. And now it's like everybody has enamel pins. Now you need at least like one cool eater bag design or some other cool products. And I have a few things coming that are very fancy, and I can't wait. But also because the resources have become available. It's the same in the States. I remember you needed some like obscure Tumblr blogs where people would put together like tips for tabling. And now there's all of the vlogs that, I mean, we also contribute to, like TikTok and Instagram, all of the tips that everybody readily shares, so that access to manufacturers and products has become more high risk, but also more high reward. Like, you need to invest more to keep up, but then the amount of profit that can be made, at least for what I've been noticing, has been a lot better as well.
Would you say that it's still possible to just do this as a hobby now that you've seen it is very commercialized now? And for a lot of people, this is like their full time, but is it still possible to do artist alley anime conventions as a hobby?
I know, at least in Austria, a lot of people do it as a hobby, but also because we have a lot of smaller conventions that are between like 600 people to like maybe 3,000 people, which the people who do it commercially don't attend anymore. Like, I'll attend these kind of smaller events either if they're local or if I'm personally invited, but otherwise I just noticed they're not financially viable if I account for like all of the expenses I have as somebody who's running a business. And then there you can see kind of like this hobby scene really flourish. It's just not what you see online. It's not what you will see at a Dokomi primarily, but it's also not something that you would see at like at these very big commercial cons. At like local cons, since each country has their own scene, most people travel to like the big cons, but not to the smaller ones. It's still easier to get into those. It's just like the very lucrative ones that have become very competitive.
Yeah, I would say it's very similar from my experience. I still see a good amount of people who only do artist alley as a hobby. Maybe I can count a handful that actually do Anime Expo, and this isn't even like their full-time role. Like, they have a 9 to 5 on top of it. But like you said, it's very competitive, that if you're going to do a juried convention where they actually look through your portfolio, look through your display, not that if you're just starting out, you can't get into these conventions, but if you're not taking it as seriously and you're just doing this for fun, but then you're not putting effort in your display or in your work, it's really difficult to get into those types of conventions, which is also why it's good to start with like local cons or local events as well.
Definitely. When I started, everybody, at least in my bubble, was doing it primarily as a hobby or as like a side job, and they all had other things going on. And there wasn't really this goal of this is what I'm going to do full time. And it's kind of just grown so much. And I still occasionally see people at Dokomi who do it for the first time, or see people pop up, but I feel like the expectation of what artist alley is has kind of shifted from small artists who are kind of having fun and doing live commissions to, this is kind of like a second dealer booth with manufactured items, and kind of like this more, I'm doing hand-drawn commissions and here are a few originals, kind of has completely been neglected. Although I really, really enjoy seeing when new artists pop up that do kind of risograph prints or lino cuts or like little clay sculptures. That's what I really enjoy seeing the artist alley personally. And I almost find it a shame that it's become so commercial, which probably sounds hypocritical because I am definitely somebody who is kind of driving this very polished commercial aspect because I also enjoy producing elaborate products and having them manufactured. I just really like kind of that product development side of it.
I've always had I wouldn't say always, but I've had criticism before that as like a content creator, especially within the artist alley scene or anime conventions, I've had people say, oh, you're ruining it for other vendor artists. And I can see why they're upset because now it's just so competitive. Even for myself, I'm experiencing it too. It's really difficult to get into some of the conventions that I previously thought were slightly easier to get in, or we're not always going to show like the bad parts of like vending at cons. Like you can assume that we get frustrated sometimes or we run into some trouble during anime cons, but for the most part, like we're going to show like the good parts of anime cons. But then I don't see why that's also a bad thing of showing our processes when it's also like helping people. Like I'm sure some people at conventions go up to you and say like, oh, I was able to vend at this convention, or I was able to start my small business because of your videos. And I appreciate that. I don't see why it's a bad thing to provide those resources. It's not like I'm literally giving you like a step-by-step on how to do exactly what I do to get like this amount of money, but I don't see why that's a bad thing, having that availability of resources, in my opinion.
There's honest criticism to be made of these like very sensationalizing, I made 50 grand at this convention weekend type reels that don't show kind of like cost or anything. They just show pure revenue because that kind of gives people false impressions. So I can, like, there's honest criticism to be had with that, but it also mostly comes down to this is kind of what the algorithm loves, and making this kind of very clickbaity content performs really, really well. And if I take my vlogging camera and I just say, yes, and this is the breakdown, and here's me doing bookkeeping all day, which is what my day-to-day actually looks like. It's just not the most engaging content. And I'm sure I could make very cinematographic shots of like Excel sheets, but it's not what people want to see. So I try to also vlog like the smaller events to kind of show the differences. But then what's on my channel, what performs well is of course like the big cons. And I personally don't really share revenue numbers at all, but a bunch of artists in the scene do. If people want to find this information, it's out there anyways. Like we like package it well and make it easily accessible. But if you want to see which conventions other people attend, they'll mostly like have like a story highlight with their con calendar for the year anyways, if there's no like big vlog for it. And there's less art style vloggers in Europe. There's really very, very few. Like there's a bunch of US content creators, but like the European scene, especially like the people who do it in English, are a lot fewer and far in between. So that content kind of stands out. Kind of, I enjoy making content. I've been making content for the internet longer than I've been doing Artist Alley through various projects. And I did like video workshops for the city of Vienna where I kind of teach all of that kind of stuff. So I come more from like a video photo background than from an art background. I just kind of stuck with art.
So have you noticed any major cultural or logistical differences in how conventions operate in different countries within the EU?
I mean, there's Japan Expo, which is very extreme in kind of like the paperwork that they require and how the sign-up process works. I mean, Germany is always, the joke is always that they're very bureaucratic and there's a lot of forms, but I found them to be a bit easier. German tax offices are personally not my friend, but the convention organizers so far have been very decent, although they are more strict when they say 50-50 fan art, they will check and they will go through with a list and they will check your portfolio in advance to see if you could come close to that and then actually count or do like graphs. So Dokomi also does check for AI art within the applications, and it's very, very strict. Same with conventions in Austria. If somebody does happen to slip through, they will kick them out on the first day and somebody else will take the place. So they will adhere to their own rules that they set themselves more than I've seen in other places. If they say the height limit is so-and-so, they will have a stick and go through. Especially at Dokomi, they have a stick and they will go through and they will make you take off the top row of grids. And the height limit at Dokomi is, in my opinion, very low. It's 8 feet. That includes the table. So that's 5 of the standard grids that everybody uses.
I don't know how the height is for the table, but usually it's about like 2 feet here. Because for Anime Expo, I think the height limit is like 7.5, and that's like five, is it? Yeah, five 12 by 12 grid cubes.
The table is, I think, like 2.5 feet at Dokomi.
Oh,
It's
okay,
like
yeah, so then
75
five
centimeters.
grids.
If you've seen my table setups online, I enjoy having quite grand setups. When we were talking earlier, you were referring to this like very, very large setup was at Konichi. They have a height limit of 15 feet.
Wow.
And I did hit that height limit. So I have my photo backdrop, which I travel with for big posters, as well as to display shirts and apparel. Other conventions are a lot more strict. Animuk is even lower than Dokumi. I think it's like you can't really go above like 6 feet,
Oh,
which
that's
really
really
doesn't.
low.
And the table is also only 4 feet and a bit. So it's like a very kind of cramped space because it's in barn shed and it's like a tilted roof and you really can't go higher than that anyways. It's a
Oh,
very cute con and I'm hoping to get in again. You kind of work with what you get. That's why my table setup will look different in every single kind of vlog I post or table pic I share because each table has like a different width and depth and like configuration. I used to have like a big kind of 3D model that I could move around and test where everything goes. And at this point, it's purely intuitive. I will show up and I will start assembling and I kind of know how to fit things and adapt them to my spot and the other tables.
yeah, I think similar here. The table sizes vary so much that at this point, I don't have, like, ideally, I would like to have a standard. If this is my 6 foot table, or this is my 8 foot, or my 10 by 10 table, this is how my display is going to look. But because I have so many different products, and sometimes certain events might have other products, it's like there's no reason for me to have a standard. Like, I'll just design it based off of what I feel in that moment. What criteria do you use when choosing which conventions to apply for? Like, do you consider attendance size, the theme, the location, or what exactly do you look for?
When I started out, my criteria was I need to know how to get there by train. I need to be kind of easily attainable. I need to be able to speak the language, which for me is German, English, and French. And I mean, Japanese doesn't help me in Europe, but it's a great thing to whip out at a convention. The criteria now is I have a revenue minimum that I want to hit for the entire duration of the convention, which is usually anything where I make below 5 grand. I'm not considering it at all. Usually that is higher for most events. And aside from that, do I have the paperwork to be legally able to sell at that event? That is usually my only criteria. I don't really care if it's an anime convention or a Comic Con or necessarily how big it is. And I rely heavily on word of mouth from others and their experiences to see what could fall into that scheme. And now that I've tried most conventions once of the big ones that are somewhat easy to get into within Europe. So I kind of have my fixed roster of these are the 20 cons that I want to do every year and I enjoy. And then I pick cities I want to visit, add vacation days afterwards.
You've touched upon this a little bit earlier, but what's the cost for a standard artist alley table? You can start with, like, I guess an average of the more local events or conventions and smaller events versus like the larger ones like Dokomi, and like how does it vary depending on like the size and location of the convention?
It varies incredibly. So most typical conventions are between like $200 and $300 is my opinion at the moment, and it goes up to like 3 grand depending on if it's a bigger booth. My Leipzig Book Fair booth this year is I think 3.5 grand. I mean it's a bigger front facing like corner booth, so you can get cheaper tables there as well. But the cheaper ones also start like 1.5 grand. It's definitely expensive. I know the last invoices I paid, Comic Con Stuttgart was like $600. So it's always around that range. It varies a lot depending on like the size and the location, but there's no clear, apart from that usually includes 1 or 2 badges. If it's a 4 foot table, it's usually 1 badge per unit you book and you can book
I
multiple
see.
units next to each other. And then anything you can add to that. Parking is usually relatively expensive. If you need a parking ticket, if you go by car, that's often up to $100. I don't book Wi-Fi because if you have a European SIM card that legally, due to EU regulations, you're allowed to use your data in all of Europe. So even if I have an Austrian data plan, I can use my data in Germany or in France as well. The convention Wi-Fi is never better than the connection I have. And it's also always such a rip-off. Travel and hotel adds a lot, especially in these very hyped cities. Leipzig Book Fair, for example, there's just not enough hotel rooms in that entire city for the amount of people that come to that event. I booked way in advance before they had even announced the date. I just guessed 3 weekends with free cancellation and hoped for the best for I think like $250. And then after they announced the date, the hotels were $2,000. It was the same hotel.
Oh my God.
Prices go up. Like in Dokomi, if you want something somewhat close to the convention, like you're looking at $800 at least for the hotel. It goes up there and that. But for like local cons, of course, it's easy. And then staying at friends is something that we do a lot. When people come to Vienna for a convention, they crash on my couch, which is in front of me. And then either stay at their place or you can send me a box and then I'll send you a box and we kind of help each other out that way. But I spend so much on hotels. I spent $9,000 just on hotels last year.
Oh my gosh. Wow. And that that's so much.
We'll get to this in the lightning round, but I am not cheap when it comes to hotels. You could significantly cut that cost, but if I'm already doing so many cons and I'm exhausted, I need that. I spent a little less on tables, but still a sizable amount of money. Every year when I do my bookkeeping, I'm like, where is all of this money going?
Is there a particular product trend that you've noticed at some cons that you've vended at? Like right now in the US, clicky keychains are very popular. I don't know if there's something similar.
Yeah, no, clicky keychains have not arrived in Europe yet. I saw,
Okay.
it's Jeffrey who went super viral with like
Yes.
the lion. Love those. Also, their content in general is great. Everybody is doing socks. Literally
Okay.
everybody in Europe is doing socks right now. It started with like one successful group order in like a closed Discord group, and then it kind of snowballed, and now socks are the new pins. Everybody has sock designs. I mean, I think I still have the most sock designs. I kind of spearheaded that trend, but it's been something I've been seeing everywhere. And slowly people are also moving into an apparel direction. So a lot more shirts, but less t-shirts and more really button-downs. I have my button-down collection, which is always fun to carry. Sweaters, all of that stuff. And eater bags used to not really be a thing, but there were some successful Kickstarter campaigns by European artists, and now everybody is doing bags. I have one coming relatively soon to match, kind of like, this is like my
Yes,
soy
I've
sauce
seen
fish
that
crossbody
one.
bag, which has been doing the rounds on social media, and I've been having so much fun filming silly trends with that. But yeah, very much like a push towards apparel and away from prints is what I've noticed in the last like 2 years.
Yeah, I think here there are a few artists who have socks. I do have one friend, she's Coco Soul. She has like a ton of socks and she's known for her socks. But socks haven't made the rounds yet here. I think some
No,
people might have like a couple pairs.
I think I have like 28 designs in stock at the
Oh my
moment.
God. Wow.
It's a lot of storage for socks. And if you're still watching this in the future, we've hit capacity. There's enough socks. Everybody has socks right now, and I've really noticed that sales have kind of plummeted for everybody for the socks because it was such a big trend. I mean, it's a great gift, especially like December for Christmas shopping, cute animals on socks. I'm not gonna I'm wearing some right now, but I'm not gonna hold them into the camera. This is not suitable for the internet. Let's not do that. Every time like somebody starts something that does super well, even if the startup cost is quite high, I mean, socks are definitely more expensive than pins to manufacture, and more complicated from like which designs you need to provide. Everybody starts jumping on it. So my joke for myself was always, what can I make that is so ludicrously expensive to manufacture that nobody will kind of copy it soon? And I think I'm slowly getting there, where I just have to invest like 15 grand into a new product, into a single item. Like, okay, I'm safe. Nobody's going to copy this for a while. It was the sweaters, because these are like jacquard knit, fully cotton sweaters. And it's just the minimum order quantity was high. But the next thing, which I think you'll appreciate, is I'm hopping on like the gacha trend. I'm making
Oh,
art
oh
toys.
wow. That's really nice.
This has not been, I mean, by the time this is out, it'll have been shown online. I haven't released it yet. They're currently in manufacturing. But making gacha toys, boy, did I start something. So I was working with like a different manufacturer first, and I made like a first prototype, and then they wanted twice or three times the amount of money than we had agreed upon.
Oh,
An extra 10 grand. I was like, I have in writing that this is not the unit price we agreed upon. And then it was a big dispute with it. And I got some of the sample money back. And then I created a new model and worked with a different manufacturer.
oh.
And now that's finally in production. But I started the first sample like a year and a half ago. Like, so it's
Oh,
a
wow.
process. That's why I also mean I'm not hopping on any fun, spontaneous show trends, because by the time something like this is done, the show is gone. And also,
Oh, yeah.
I'm not comfortable making like fan art of such like produced, highly manufactured products. That's why all of my fan art things are mainly just like prints and stickers, because it falls less in this kind of super commercial dealer booth type vibe.
Yeah, no, I bet with because I've heard figures are very expensive to manufacture, so you're doing a good job starting that.
I have a lot of figurines and collections. Like my pins are here, and then I have all of my art toys, which like I those are things that I love collecting. And like the profit margin on these is gonna be nowhere near as good as like pins or socks or whatever, just because the mold fee and the design fee and everything. And then I need to have them CE tested because they fall under like safety regulations. So just a lot more paperwork, but it's something that I have fun in, and that's kind of my goal for this year, is to kind of produce stuff that I actually love and not feel like I kind of have to hop on some other trends. I'd love to do like kitchenware or something like that, like
Yeah.
plates and dish towels and custom shaped bento boxes. Like that's what I would love to make if only I had more storage space. Can't wait for like 1,000 of these Shiba figurines to show up on my doorstep. Really cannot wait. I'm sure I have space by then, but also just kind of things that I actually want to use. Kind of that's my goal for the time being.
That's amazing. Is there anything you would do differently if you could start Artist Alley over again?
At the beginning, I had a few conventions that did really well, even though my art style wasn't as consistent or as polished as it probably would have needed to be, to then use that money to invest in big products. So I kind of did complicated products before I felt like my art was probably good enough to justify the amount I was ordering. And then I was kind of stuck on a lot of product. And then luckily I spent a lot of time in like designing and manufacturing that kind of caught up. But still I have some old designs that I ordered so many of that I still need to do like blind bags or whatever to get rid of, a big sale, clearance sale. But I feel like we all have those items that we were like, this is going to be great. And I never know in hindsight what would work. I originally ordered way too few of the fish soy sauce bags. I had ordered an initial batch and I was like, okay, I'm going to open these up for pre-order before Dokomi. And then the pre-order sold out like the first few hours. I was like, this was supposed to last for the year. So I had to kind of rush order, and then they didn't arrive in time for Dokomi last year. I only had like 20 that I had set aside. So like things like that where I'm like, I need to prep better in advance and not rush everything. But I'm getting better at that, I tell myself, which is absolutely not the case. But I'm trying.
Yes. Yeah, I think that's also a problem for myself, is just figuring out what quantities to order for certain items. Because like you said, I still have some products from 3 years ago that I'm just trying to sell out. But then there's also certain products like for my Ida backpacks, I wish I ordered more. I think at the time I just couldn't because like, bags are very expensive.
Upfront, the cost is
Yeah, it's so expensive.
significant.
But then I didn't know they would sell out within a few months. It's like I wish I ordered more, but I just, at the time it just didn't work out. So figuring out quantity is good. So you have a lot of product types that you've brought up. I've seen that you have like socks, bags, shirts, on top of the typical prints. How many of each product do you typically bring to cons?
As much as I can carry is a very cop-out answer. For enamel pins, I have clear cases that have different compartments, and then I kind of fill them up to the brim with each design, and that'll have to be good enough. But I have 126 enamel pins in stock at the moment. So I bring between 5 and 20 per design.
Okay.
For socks, I bring between 20 and 100 for each design. I know which ones would be the best sellers, and I know which ones I could probably leave at home at this point, but I kind of need to get rid of the last few. And people love to get like a big set and get many at once, so that's fine. I bring like 10 to 20 prints, 10 patches per design. I like to bring around 50 bags. For like regular conventions, for bigger cons, I would bring more stock, but then again, it varies so much from convention to convention. I used to bring a bunch of washi tape and notepads, and I still have a lot of stock, and I'm kind of slowly getting rid of it, but I'm stopped doing stationery in that way. And acrylic keychains, I'm not quite sure what it is, but it feels like I'm cursed when it comes to acrylic keychains. It doesn't matter if it's a fan art design that is popular as a tote bag and as a sticker. If I make a keychain out of it, it will not sell. So I've tried it a few times. I've tried it with like really big keychains. I've tried it with like very small keychains and like phone charms. I cannot get rid of acrylic keychains. My embroidered patches do way better than my keychains do, for example. It's varies so much from artist to artist, like what product type does well for them. But I'm also not that great at counting in advance. If you've seen any vlogs of me, I will just fill up the box with as much as fits in there. and that has to be enough. I'm sure it's fine. I do inventory at the end and I kind of keep track of my sales, so I know I would have good data to compare it to. I just don't utilize it when packing. I use it for like my year-end reports and for ordering products because I always pack the night before the convention. I always pack before I need to leave. I don't do it in advance, and often I don't really open my suitcase. Like, my suitcases are closed because I do a con every weekend basically in like during the season. So my setup is always in one suitcase, and then everything else is in suitcases and boxes, and I just open it up, restock, and close it again. Or I have a tally list of what's sold out, what do I need to add to the bag. So it's always kind of in flux. But those are roughly the numbers I use.
Yeah, I would say that's a good like rough estimate. I know for myself, even though I like to think, oh, like for stickers, I'll have at least 20 or so. But if anything, if I have like back-to-back conventions, it's like, oh, this looks relatively empty. I have space in it. I'll just add more. I don't really know the exact quantities.
That is how it works.
As long as it doesn't sell out, it'll be fine. How do you store your products when traveling to a convention?
For like smaller stuff, it's usually all in separate boxes, which either fit in suitcases if I'm traveling by train, or big cons, I will do 4 suitcases and like 8 IKEA bags of stock, because I found that apparel and to some extent socks as well fits in these bags better if you go by car, because you can kind of squish it, and suitcases are just very bulky. So I'll have like a trolley and IKEA bags, and that usually works out fine for me, and then I'll have grid storage organization behind my booth at the table, and I kind of make everything accessible that way.
In the US, there's a growing issue of seeing resellers from Temu and AliExpress vending within Artist Alley. Have you experienced or seen this at some of the conventions that you vended at?
I see it occasionally at more of the Comic-Con types where they are less strict and they don't check applicants in advance. The more anime community-oriented events are all very strict, as I mentioned before, with AI and everything. So if people notice it, they will complain. I had somebody 2 years ago at Leipzig Book Fair who was clearly a reseller opposite me with one of the pro Artist Alley booths. And I spent my day taking pictures of the booth, finding the stuff on AliExpress and messaging the organizers to the point where they're like, please stop. We know everything is bootleg. There's not much we can do about it now. And I was like, yeah, don't let them in again. I was furious. They had to take a few things down where it was clearly stolen art from other artists, but like the bootleg eater bags and stuff with like official Genshin logos on it, they got to keep, which I was not super happy about. But aside from that, usually we're very strict with all of the resellers. They really stick to the dealer booth.
Yeah, I think somewhat similarly here, they're not as strict as the EU, but for most of the time, usually those resellers are in the comic conventions, since I think they are also as a little bit more lenient versus anime conventions. I think for anime conventions, they're more concerned about like tracing AI work. Mm-hmm. Sometimes if there are resellers, maybe it's like the crochet goods because they're not as regulated. Yeah. And sometimes even with the juried conventions, there are a few tracers or AI works that kind of go through the cracks, unfortunately.
And it's getting increasingly hard. Also, not just because the quality of the traces in the AI art is becoming harder to detect, although that is somewhat the case, but also just because of the amount of people who apply to these events is just staggering. I remember I helped organize a convention in Austria, like a small one-day event. And it was the first time this event was happening. And we had like 700 followers on Instagram or something at the time when we opened applications. And within the first day, we had 300 applications from people all across Europe. And I was like,
oh, wow.
We are jurying this, and I am not taking anyone who has to travel far because I know you're not going to make any money here because this is like a small new event. But it's just become super competitive to get in places. I know at Dokomi, if you wanted to get into like the first come, first serve section, you had maybe a minute. Even like not even that, probably. It took me 32 seconds to sign up this year because I was ready. The last few years, the servers always crashed every single year.
Oof. Yeah, it's very rough the past few years for Artist Alleys.
Let's see if this will continue to grow or if the bubble will pop eventually. We will see.
So moving on to our speed round / miscellaneous. When it comes to Artist Alley, what do you invest in and what are you cheap about?
I invest in product. I like having like very expensive produced products. I invest in my display. I like to have things look very consistent and on brand and have like good banners and kind of setups. And then I'm also not particularly cheap about hotels, but I am cheap about travel usually, and I'm cheap about food. So I don't really care if I'm having the same super cheap sandwiches and snacks that are clearly not good for me, but I will make do.
What's your controversial artist alley opinion?
I feel like conventions have every right to do applications however they want. And I somewhat get frustrated when people think they have an opinion on saying, no, you have to do jury or you have to do first come, first serve, or this is the only fair way. Most of these conventions are businesses and they can totally get to decide who gets in or who doesn't. They don't owe you an explanation. And I always find it difficult when people blame them. Like, of course, I'm upset when a jury doesn't pick my work, but I won't be going publicly shaming them or demanding an explanation. And I feel like it is in their interest to have the best offerings for the customers that come, which are the attendees, and they get to pick who fills their hall and with what.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think a lot of people get so caught up in not getting, I mean, sometimes obviously I feel that way too. Like, of course, I can feel upset about not getting into a convention. But at the end of the day, like, it's a business. I think people forget that their main goal is to make money. If they're not happy with how a con is working their system, like, they're just in it for money. Like, they're not here to make you happy, unfortunately.
Even if, because a lot of the conventions are run by NGOs or like are very community led, even then it is in their best interest to do whatever they think is best for the attendees and not necessarily for the artists. Like they get to decide and I have no say in it. And I also don't feel like I get to demand certain things from organizers. Like I'm happy that they let me in and that's it. This is a business transaction.
Yes, exactly. What has been your biggest money mistake with your business and why?
Aside from somewhat poor inventory management or ordering too much or too little, I once booked 2 hotels for an event because I usually, if I book way in advance and not sure if I get in, I would book 2 hotels with like free cancellation and then I would pick the cheaper or the more expensive option depending on what I want. And I once just forgot to cancel the other one and it got
Oh no.
sent the bill on the day arriving. Like, why are the two? I just gave the hotel to a friend. I was like, I cannot cancel this anymore. This is nicer than where you were going to stay. I already paid for it. Just go there. But that was like $600 where I was like, I did not need to spend that. That was silly on my part, but it happens.
Yeah, I also book 2 hotels. I think for my own peace of mind because I've seen another artist once book a hotel, but then for whatever reason that hotel canceled on them. So I was like, okay, I don't want that to happen to me, so I always book 2. But I'm also afraid that I would accidentally get double booked or I would have to
Charged
pay
twice.
double, so I have to like check. Yeah. It's like, oh no. What is your biggest business insecurity if you have one?
I used to be a print artist and I used to do like very painterly large illustrations that would take forever. And since I've focused so much on product lately, I feel like I'm no longer known as like an artist. Like people don't really see the painted works. They see like products I designed, which is still of course creative work. And as I said earlier, I love seeing different types of art in the artist alley. But I'm always somewhat insecure when people ask me for tips or advice or ideas because I just don't really fit into that mold anymore. I'd love to get back into it, but I've just seen that my prints don't sell nearly as well as other products do, especially like original art prints. So I'm hoping to kind of reconnect with like more traditional art mediums this year. Feel more like an artist, whatever that is supposed to mean.
When did you first feel successful with your business and what does that word mean to you?
My first big moment of success was when I was working at a theater for like, I was like maybe $300 a month. It was like 10 hours. Like it's not a lot of work a week there, mainly just checking tickets before the show and then leaving again at like a small local theater in Austria. And then I had one convention where I did drastically better than all before and I earned as much during that week than I did in a year at the theater. And I was like, okay, I can quit my theater job. I can actually consider doing this as a business. And I was like in 2019. And then 2020, I was like, okay, what do I do now? And I guess I stuck with it during the pandemic and here I am.
Amazing. Are you working on any big projects or new products that you'd like to share?
I feel like I've spoiled most of them. I'm making an eater bag. I'm making a few different bags, actually. Let's see which of them will already be teased on my social media when this comes out to match. They're all Japanese food themed. I'm very much like the next few collections I'm doing a pin collection that is Japanese food themed. I'm doing some new gacha pins, like different bubble teas and different like matcha snacks. I have like 40 pins being manufactured right now. So that's a lot of fun. Of course, I have my little Shiba-san ramen chef figurine. What else? I have new patches. I have so much stuff being currently manufactured. I can't wait for Lunar New Year to be over and to get updates from all of my manufacturers. And then as soon as that arrives, there'll be a new collection. There'll always be something new. And I can't wait to see what that actually is.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much. I learned so much because I didn't really know a lot about conventions in the EU. So I'm really glad you reached out. So thank you so much for coming on. Where can our audience find you?
Let's do the shameless plug at the end of the podcast. I am Kabujiro basically everywhere. It's Kabujiro. I am that on Instagram and TikTok if you want short form video content. I also post a bunch of artist alley tips. For long form, I am Kabujiro on YouTube. I am on all of the text-based platforms, so Blue Sky, Twitter, sorry, X, no, actually it's still Twitter. So all of those, and I post roughly the same thing everywhere. And then I also have a newsletter. So if you go to store.kabujiro.com, you can find all of my products, my list of upcoming events, and also sign up to my newsletter where I share behind the scenes artist alley stuff, discount codes, and updates on all of the fun products I'm making and I featured during this talk as well.
Amazing. Well, thank you again for joining us. Very enlightening
Thanks
conversation.
for having me.
And thank you to everyone listening in. I will see you all in the next episode. Bye.